All right, so you want to dive into this digital rabbit hole, notes on a YouTube video about the internet, you and me both. Seems like you're really after that, like, matrix code level of understanding how it really works.
Yeah, kind of like figuring out a magic trick, way more fun when you see how it's done.
Yeah.
And the internet's just full of those "how did they do that" moments.
Totally. So the video kicks off with online services. Thankfully, it doesn't just mention Facebook and call it a day.
Right. It really hits home how much we depend on the internet without even realizing it.
Right.
We're talking like education platforms, Moodle going virtual, government services going digital, even, real-time traffic updates, saving us from those rush hour nightmares. It's all happening in this digital space. Ever think about how even something as basic as checking the bus schedule
Relies on the internet.
Exactly. Constant stream of data flying around.
Whoa. It is like this hidden world working overtime so we can just, go about our day. Speaking of hidden worlds, how does all that data even move around so fast? The video gets into data compression, and I gotta admit, kind of lost me there.
Honestly, it sounds way more complicated than it is. Imagine sending a huge file, a whole movie, without zipping it at first.
It'd take forever.
Exactly. Ages to send, even longer to download. Compression basically takes that big file, removes anything redundant, makes it smaller, faster.
So it's like
those vacuum seal travel bags. They shrink down bulky clothes, but all the important stuff's still there.
Okay, that's a much better explanation. So instead of sending, a huge package, it's more like a postcard with all the important stuff still there. Data compression in a nutshell. Which brings us to, well, it's fascinating. A bit of minefield social networks.
Right. And the video nails it. It's not just liking pictures and, sharing memes. Social networks have their own language, their own rules.
It's like the Wild West out there sometimes.
Totally. But we're talking about how profiles are structured, how those online communities come together, and something people forget all the time, netiquette.
Ah, yes. Netiquette, the digital equivalent of remembering please and thank you. Although, it seems like that's becoming a lost art.
Tell me about it.
Yeah.
Just because there's a screen doesn't mean common courtesy disappears. Honestly, with so much online anonymity these days, netiquette's more important than ever. Keeps things respectful, productive.
Couldn't agree more. Now, the next topic sounds kind of intimidating. Ubiquitous computing. Are we entering the matrix yet?
Not quite, but it's definitely mind-blowing. Basically, it just means those tiny computer chips, microprocessors. They're everywhere.
No way.
Oh, yeah. Your, Oyster card, contactless payments, even fitness trackers. Technology is woven into, the fabric of our lives these days. Did you know some pet trackers even use, GPS and internet? So if your furry friend wanders off...
You can find them.
Exactly.
Wow, so tech is becoming invisible, but also more important to how we live.
Yeah.
Speaking of invisible connections, the video dives into the geography of the internet. Wilder than I ever imagined.
Think of it like a digital map, but with layers upon layers. So you've got your home network, right?
Yeah.
That connects to your internet provider's network, which then connects to these massive server farms where websites and data actually live. It's this mind-blowing web that lets information travel the globe in, milliseconds.
It's mind-boggling.
Right.
And I bet most people, don't even give it a second thought. They just expect their cat videos to load instantly.
Exactly. But underneath those cat videos is this whole system of data transmission. We're talking acronyms like HTTP, HTML, concepts like simplex and duplex. These are the rules of the road, how info gets packaged up, addressed, delivered across the internet.
So it's we might not need to know how an engine works to drive, but understanding a little makes you appreciate the ride more. Maybe even troubleshoot if things go wrong.
Exactly. Learning a bit about engines, understanding these basic internet principles makes you a more informed, empowered user.
I like the sound of that. This next part really got me. The video makes this subtle but crucial distinction between real-time communication, like video calls, and that slight delay with instant messaging. I just assumed both were happening live.
It's an easy mistake. But there are some key differences. With video calls, it's all about sending that audio and video as fast as possible so it feels like a real-time conversation.
Yeah.
But even then, there's a tiny delay as data goes through all those networks.
I guess that makes sense.
With instant messaging, that delay is usually a bit more noticeable, especially if you've ever played a fast-paced game online and there's lag between your messaging and getting a response.
Oh, tell me about it. The worst.
Right.
So even when it seems instant, technology has its limits. And speaking of behind the scenes, there's this client-server tango the video mentions. This sounds a bit advanced, even for us.
It sounds complicated, but it's pretty simple once you break it down. It's like ordering food. You're the client, you browse the menu, place your order. The kitchen, that's the server, prepares everything just how you like it. Then the waiter brings you your meal, the food. That's the information or service you're requesting online.
Okay, I can actually picture that. So our devices are sending out these little requests all the time to servers all over the place, and those servers are working hard to process them, send back what we need.
That's it. Constant dance between client and server, info flowing back and forth. It's what gives us those seamless online experiences we expect.
Seamless until it isn't, right?
Well, exactly. Just like a good dance partner, a well-maintained server is essential for keeping things running smoothly.
Love the analogy. Okay, the video briefly mentions RFID and NFC, and I gotta be honest, I'm not totally clear on the difference. They both sound like tap your phone to pay to me.
You're on the right track. They both use radio waves, but NFC, that's near-field communication. It's like RFID's cooler, more powerful cousin.
Oh, so?
Well, NFC allows two-way communication, and it's way more secure. That's why it's the standard for things like contactless payments. Think of RFID, radio frequency identification, as the older, simpler tech, like key fobs, those anti-theft tags in stores.
Okay, so RFID is like the old walkie-talkie, and NFC is the smartphone of the wireless communication world. Got it.
Perfect analogy. And just like smartphones changed how we communicate, NFC is paving the way for a way more connected world.
Can't argue with that. Okay, last concept before we move on: bandwidth. I hear this term all the time, but honestly, not 100% sure what it means. Is it just another way of saying internet speed?
Common misconception. Think of it like a highway. The wider the highway, the more cars can travel at once without causing a jam. Bandwidth is basically the width of the highway for your internet connection.
So more bandwidth equals more data flowing through at once, which means faster loading, smoother streaming.
You got it. And, like rush hour on the highway, if too many devices are using the same bandwidth, things can slow down. It's all about capacity.
That makes a lot more sense. It's like that saying, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Even with a super fast internet plan, if your bandwidth is limited,
you're going to hit those bottlenecks.
Exactly. Okay, it's all start and click now. Before we move on, what stood out to you the most so far? Anything that surprised you or maybe challenged what you thought you knew about the internet?
You know, when you were talking about bottlenecks, it reminded me of something the video touched on. Client-side versus server-side processing.
Oh, yeah. It mentioned it briefly, but I'd love to dig into that a bit more.
Okay, so think of it this way. Have you ever noticed how some websites are super responsive? Like search results pop up as you type.
Yeah, it's like magic.
Right. That's often client-side processing doing its thing.
What's happening there?
Basically, your web browser is doing a lot of the work, searching through data that's already on your device.
So it's like having a mini version of the website saved on my computer.
Exactly. It's like having a cheat sheet, so things load super fast.
That's really clever. But I'm guessing not everything can be handled that way.
You're right. For more complex stuff, like if you're submitting an online order, that data needs to go all the way to the server, get processed, and then send a confirmation back.
Makes sense.
That's server-side processing. It's like the difference between grabbing a snack from your pantry versus ordering takeout.
Okay, yeah. Sometimes you need that pro-level cooking.
Exactly.
It's amazing how much is happening behind the scenes for even the simplest things.
It really is. And speaking of behind the scenes, the video touched on database management systems.
Okay, I have to admit, that's one area where my eyes glazed over a little.
Yeah, it sounds super dry, doesn't it?
Like as exciting as watching paint dry.
But they're actually really crucial and kind of cool when you think about it.
Really? Okay, tell me more.
Imagine a library, right? But instead of books, it's got every single piece of info a company or an organization needs.
Wow, that's a lot of information.
Yeah, we're talking customer data, financial records, product inventories, anything and everything.
So instead of like those old library catalogs, it's more like a super organized digital warehouse.
Exactly. And the cool part is these systems are incredibly good at storing and retrieving all that information quickly.
So it's like a super powered search engine. You can find anything in an instant.
Exactly. No more digging through mountains of paperwork. Need to find a specific customer record from 5 years ago. No problem.
Okay, you're right. I take back my watching paint dry comment.
It's pretty impressive.
And a little scary when you think about how much data is out there.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword for sure. But on a more technical level, this is actually a big part of what makes the internet work.
How so?
Remember we were talking about those layers of
You got our own digital address.
Exactly. And just like a postal address, data needs a way to be routed to the correct destination. That's where TCP/IP comes in.
Okay, I've definitely heard of that, but I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure what it means.
No worries. It's one of those things that's so fundamental to the internet, most people don't even realize it's there.
So what did it do?
Think of TCP, Transmission Control Protocol, kind of like this. You've got a message, and you break it down into numbered envelopes. Then you send out all those envelopes separately, and they get reassembled in the right order on the other side.
Interesting. So it's like a jigsaw puzzle, making sure all the pieces get where they need to go.
Exactly. And then there's IP, or Internet Protocol. That's like the addressing system for all those envelopes, making sure they get delivered to the right place.
That's where the address part comes in. It's amazing that it works so seamlessly most of the time.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's like a hidden postal service working behind the scenes to make all our digital communication possible.
Love that analogy. Okay, so we've covered data zipping around networks, but what about those web pages themselves? The video mentioned HTTP and HTML. I know they're important, but I've always been a bit fuzzy on what they actually do.
Well, think of it like this. HTTP, or Hypertext Transfer Protocol, is basically the language that web browsers and servers use to talk to each other.
So it's how they communicate.
Exactly. When you type in a web address, your browser sends an HTTP request to the server, basically saying, hey, can I see this website?
And then the server responds.
Right. But it needs to know how to package up all those files so your browser can understand them.
Ah, that's where HTML comes in.
You got it. HTML, Hypertext Markup Language, is basically the code that tells your browser how to display everything. Text, images, links, you name it.
So it's like the formatting, making it look nice instead of just a jumbled mess.
Exactly. It's why websites can look totally different from each other, even though they're all just files and data at their core.
That's really interesting. So HTTP is like the request, and HTML is the beautifully formatted response.
That's a great way to put it.
It's really amazing how all these different technologies work together.
It really is. It's a testament to how innovative people have been in building this whole system.
Absolutely. Now, before we go too far down this rabbit hole, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, data transmission types.
Oh, yeah. Simplex, half duplex, full duplex. Those are fun to say.
They really are. But, full disclosure, I have no idea what they mean.
Don't worry, they're actually not that complicated. Imagine having a conversation. Simplex is like talking through a megaphone. You can send info out, but you can't receive anything back.
So it's a one-way street.
Exactly, like a radio broadcast. Information goes out, but there's no coming back.
Okay, that makes sense. So what's half duplex then?
Half duplex is like using a walkie-talkie.
Yeah.
You can both send and receive, but you have to take turns.
So it's like a two-way street, but with traffic lights.
Perfect analogy.
And full duplex is the no traffic lights option.
You got it. Full duplex is like a regular phone call. You can both talk and listen at the same time.
That sounds like the most efficient, but also probably the most complex to set up.
You're absolutely right. It takes more sophisticated tech to make it work, but it allows for the most natural flow of communication.
It's amazing how all these different modes of communication are happening all the time, behind the scenes, making everything work.
It really highlights how much ingenuity goes into building something like the internet. It's pretty remarkable.
Absolutely. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive into all things internet, what stood out to you the most from the video? Was there a particular insight or concept that really stuck with you?
It really makes you think about how much the internet's changing all the time, right? For me, it's that idea of the internet as this living thing almost. We get so used to using it every day, but the video really drove home how it's woven into like everything, how we learn, how governments work.
Yeah, it's easy to forget it's not static, always growing, changing, like you said. Which brings us to that question the video leaves us with: what does the future hold? How is this digital world going to reshape things as it keeps evolving?
It really makes you think, I mean, who could have predicted how big social media would get, or how we watch movies now? Trying to imagine the internet in 10, 20 years.
It's like trying to predict the weather in a tornado. Exciting, but kind of scary too.
Totally. But that's why understanding those basic principles we've been talking about is so important.
It's like having a map, even if you don't know exactly where you're going.
Exactly. AI, virtual reality, who knows what's next? But those core ideas, those will still be relevant.
That's actually really reassuring. So it's not about memorizing every little detail. It's more about getting that big picture understanding.
Exactly. And hey, who knows? Maybe this deep dive will spark some ideas for someone listening. Maybe they'll be the ones to come up with the next big online thing.
I love that. All right, folks. There you have it. We've journeyed from those hidden depths of data transmission to the, I don't know, what would it be? the penthouse suite of online services.
Sounds about right.
We've cracked the code, demystified the jargon, hopefully made you a little more curious about this whole internet thing.
It's been fun. Remember, the more you understand about the tech that shapes your world, the more power you have as a user, as a creator, as, well, just a person living in this digital age.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And on that note, we'll leave you with one last thought. What part of the internet are you most curious about? What rabbit holes are calling your name? Because remember, the best part about the internet, there's always something new to discover just a click away.
Happy exploring, everyone.
Catch you in the next deep dive.